Hello! Aspie's back with another vlog. Or should that be podcast, seeing as vlogging implies video footage. This is mostly audio. I haven't the time to delve into news footage and risk evoking copyright infringements, etc. Enough YouTubers have that problem already. I'm just here to air my thoughts and give my proverbial 2 cents. Or is that 2 pence? I'm from Britain, by the way, not America. No offence, Americans. My mum was American. Anyway, moving on. This is the Aspie Hyena vlog. I have a problem with choice. As a youngster, you are expected to do what you are told to do when asked and behave accordingly. Expectations are laid out for you. When your daily schedule is predetermined, there's certainty and structure. Without it, we have a choice. But what if you can't decide? What if you struggle to make decisions independently? That's the topic I want to explore in this vlog. When one is moulded to the conditions of absolute obedience, the capacity of choice is nullified. As children, we are expected to follow strict instructions. Don't cross the road without looking both ways. Always say please and thank you. Always open the door for your elders. Ladies first. I grew up in the 90s, so I'm kind of a product of that age. Kind of goes without saying, actually. Sorry, stupid thing to say. Okay. In the 90s, there was no corporal punishment, no cane or Calvinistic Victorian ideals. That's decades earlier, for goodness sakes. But there was respect. Furthermore, the sharp rebuke of an elder was all that was needed, in my case anyway, to install discipline. As a child on the autism spectrum, I lacked the social imagination to disobey on purpose. Disobedience isn't necessarily an impossibility. Adults can't hurt you, at least legally, but they can shout at you and order you to obey. For children without authority, or those who do not recognise or acknowledge it, the fear of rebuke is absent. The adult cannot physically rebuke. They cannot hit you or restrain you or touch you. So, if the child should lack respect or feel no sense of threat or intimidation at a sharp rebuke, there's nothing to stop them from disobeying. There are no physical restraints, no obstacles to prevent them from disobedience. I am not in any way suggesting the reintroduction of the cane or the slipper. We're a bit past that point, to be honest. Rather, I'm exploring how I, personally, have arrived at a point where I am afraid to make a choice for myself. See, I'm able to choose, but my capacity or ability is impaired somewhat. I'm going to keep with the analogy of a child and their sense of morality. A disobedient child, they will eventually come around to obey certain instructions, but not to please their elders, but to keep themselves safe. Most of that is done through common sense. So through experience, they will learn that it is unwise to cross a road when there's a car coming. Eventually, they may start to rebuke others for being stupid or putting themselves in danger. Sort of like a natural character development. As for the teachers, they have a legal duty towards pupils. I recall something my geography teacher told me when I was a high school student, that they are your legal guardians. Teachers are your substitute parental guardians. Discipline is a matter not of control or a denial of free will, but rather welfare, the welfare of the child. Until you are a legal adult, you lack the capacity to make certain legal choices. There are perhaps a few legal grey areas, but essentially the child is in legal custody of an adult, parent, guardian or teacher, up until they reach a certain age. Teenagers may gain more independence. They can hang out with other boys, go partying or go to clubs, go to the movies, etc. Likely, their parent or guardian will expect them home at a certain hour. If they have a sleepover at a friend's house, said friend's parent or adult guardian will have legal responsibility over their welfare. These parameters are usually void by the time you reach 18. In my case, it was a bit sooner. I finished school when I was 16, or just before I was 17. But then I moved into sixth form, where I had more freedom to make my own choices in studies and extracurricular activities, etc. This was expected, but there was a caveat. If I got ill or I should come into college unwell, a tutor would suggest that I go home. But I had to report at the front desk so that my parents or guardians would be notified if I returned or not. It's for similar reasons like taking the register at school or work, or which is mostly for in the event of a fire alarm or critical emergency. See, even adults working on a site have certain restrictions. Sure, they can choose to quit or go on strike, etc., or perhaps work flexible hours like I do at my job, but the employer has a legal duty, not of custody, but of general welfare. All workers have rights, or at least they should have rights in modern law. Infringement of those rights can result in legal action against the employer. To an extent, they have a legal duty of care. There's also respect and understanding between the two parties, mainly of adults. Failure of the employees may result in termination of employment or expulsion from school, college. The same goes for law and order. Break the law, go to jail, or risk a fine or conviction. So long as those laws are obeyed, you have freedom and choice. But what if you are uncertain about those choices? What if you, say, lack capacity? Now let's make one thing certain, okay? I do have capacity. Me personally, Aspie Hyena. I can make choices. I can decide what to eat or where to go. I have a job and a contract of employment. I could choose to stay at home and be unemployed. It's not ideal, but nothing is physically preventing me from making that choice. Mentally, however, I find myself compelled by a sense of duty. This stems from my childhood experiences and upbringing. Never disobey your elders, chew before swallowing, stop, look and listen. I didn't obey because it was for my welfare, but because I was told. I was instructed. I did not... I did have choice, only it didn't always feel that way. And sometimes it still doesn't. Something compels me to obey instructions or to live by a certain moral code. As I've already stated, there are no physical barriers. Nothing tangible restrains me. But there are psychological barriers within my subconscious which prevents me from disobeying the rules. Is it instinct, respect, or a moral sense of duty? Perhaps it is pride. The late Pete Steele of my favourite doom metal band Typo Negative once did this interview, I'll post a link up the top there, where he talked about his political beliefs. To paraphrase, I choose to get off my arse and work because I've got pride. I don't get up every morning so slobs can stay at home, not work and watch Oprah. Those are not his exact words, I'm just paraphrasing. That sums up my ethics. Though personally, I think it's more to do with duty than pride. However, I have lived off benefits. I've been out of work. I've spent some of my youth living off the state, not knowing what to do with my life. I was afraid of people and of interacting with the outside world. I still am to an extent, especially after COVID and lockdown demolished every fibre of confidence I spent close to a decade of working adulthood building up. I'm essentially back to where I was mentally when I was unemployed. Yes, I am now working, but I've only just resumed attending work-based conferences on a regular basis. I've never been 100% comfortable in crowded public spaces, but I do it anyway because it is expected of me, and I do not want to go back on the dole. In a sense, I choose not to be a burden on society, but there is also a sense of moral duty behind that choice. Is it still designated as free will when there are determinants behind it? As someone who received learning support at school and then income support financially as an adult, or young adult rather, I feel that I owe something back. Not to the morons in Parliament, but to this imperfect nation that helped shape the person that I am today. A lot of teachers and peers helped to make me what I am today. I can't let their efforts have been in vain. I do not wish to be a burden. I choose not to be a burden. I choose to contribute, I choose to give something back in return. But on a general basis, do I still have choice? I'm not entirely sure. I know that I struggle to make certain choices. Perhaps I'm afraid of making the wrong choice. There's no certainty or security in making certain choices. I could be making a serious mistake. But it is through mistakes in which we learn from experience, or through experience rather. In a way, that's how I came to be a writer. For anyone wondering why Aspie Hyena lacks a regular schedule on YouTube, it's a result of 3 factors. I'm working, we're no longer in lockdown, and I'm busy writing a novel. It's a lot of arduous work, which takes up most of my spare time. I've been a member of a local writers group, and I'm still trying to perfect my craft. To be a good writer, one must learn from their mistakes. But I wasn't always a literary type. As a young boy, I preferred maths and arithmetic. Simple sums and multiplication represented certainty. There was always a right answer, and it felt good when I could work it out for myself. There was safety in numbers, so to speak. There was logic and sense. English literacy, on the other hand, was nonsense. I didn't understand the complexion or equation of building sentences. Also, words were boring. But numbers and shapes were fascinating. I could find structure and relevance in maths. English consisted of a looser structure. The right answer to a question wasn't so simple. Therefore, English literacy meant uncertainty. As a teenager in high school, the scale was completely flipped. Maths became more difficult and laborious. Now, some of the teachers share the blame on this. Aside from my first year teacher, she was good. The problem with subsequent teachers from year 8 onwards was that they could not maintain discipline or evoke enthusiasm among the pupils. I don't intend on naming names or calling out certain individuals, but in year 8 I had a maths teacher who could not govern a classroom of rowdy little turds who just didn't give a toss about maths. None of us gave a toss about maths. None of them cared, and since they didn't care, neither could I. When the teacher gave up, I gave up. I no longer paid attention. Maths just became a chore. Looking back, I feel that I missed out on a lot. There's so much I could have learnt from maths and science, so much more I could have done with it. Because I was miserable with maths, I was miserable at physics. There went my career path of being an astronaut, or astronomer, or whatever. I was cheated. One of my choices for college was chemistry, but because I didn't have the right GCSE at maths, I couldn't get onto it. And by the time I retook my maths course, I just decided it wasn't worth it. What a waste. However, I discovered in my teenage years a hidden love for literature. I wasn't exactly an avid reader or proverbial literary lizard, to paraphrase Gustave Flaubert, but I was interested. Not because it was safe, quite the opposite, in fact. In pre-adolescence, I was scared witless at the very concept of a horror movie. Now, our mum was very liberal with renting videos and having us watch Arnold Schwarzenegger impaling Vernon Wells and dropping David Patrick Kelly off a cliff in Commando, or Jean-Claude Van Damme hurling He-Man through a shredder. Sorry, Dolph Lundgren. Then my darling brother persuaded Mum to rent out Alien, and for some reason, curiosity got the best of me, and I ended up watching John Hurt live up to his name. That was the beginning of my love of the horror movie. For horror literature and fantasy, that came during years 7 and 8 in English. My first English teacher at secondary school was the best I could ever hoped for. True, I was a lousy reader and I could barely string a coherent sentence together, let alone speak with a steady vocabulary, but she was the foundation of this young creative mind working hard to achieve his dreams. We did lessons or courses in creating a make-your-own-adventure fantasy with stock Tolkien characters. In year 7, I first learnt about wargs and balrogs. In year 8, we covered vampires and Gothic horror. And from there, my mind was set. It was a while before I got into reading genuine horror. I'd seen the Tobe Hooper directed miniseries of Salem's Lot, but the book was somewhat inaccessible due to Stephen King's use of internal monologue and typing thoughts in italics. These, of course, I would later inhibit in my own prose, but it took some time to perfect it. A lot of that was down to trial and error. I recall choosing to do my GCSE coursework on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, although I was not quite able to fully decipher her early 19th century prose. Years later, I reread Frankenstein and slapped my head at how many minute details I had missed. Nowadays, I like to consult an atlas when reading about a character upon his travels. Learning more about these actual real locations re-inspires the Gothic aesthetic that I missed when I first read the book. And the themes, the conflict between the flawed creator and the abominable creation, the indirect suffering Frankenstein inflicts upon those he loves dearest, the direct comparisons to Prometheus and Greek mythology, which I never properly learnt until I swapped A-level history for classics. But none of those choices were easy. Each entailed some form of sacrifice or hardship. I was literally enlightened, and yet socially illiterate. Without support from my mum or tutors, I was incapable of making the choice. And whenever that choice was made, I was never completely sure if it was the right choice. I'd have liked to have done more in science and art when I first had the chance, but I always felt time worked against me, and that I had to choose wisely and stay with it. I wanted to be a published author by the time I reached adulthood. It seems stupid now, knowing I wasn't much of a writer back then. I had half of the vocabulary, but none of the skill or patience to implement it. At 17 or 18, as I first construed chapters for an as yet unfinished novel, I was underwhelmed and disappointed at my lack of talent. Something was missing. The prose did not flow in a lucid structure. It was like segments were copied and pasted without relevance or coherence. Was I reading enough books? Was I reading the right books? Was I reading them correctly? Seeing my efforts evoke so little of an impact upon the creator, no less, I put down my pen and paper and resolved to continue my studies in sullen silence. One day I will be ready, but not today. I am still uncertain about my choices. If I were Indiana Jones, having to drink from the cup that giveth life, or take it, I dread to think of the consequences. Insert "you have chosen poorly" meme here, while yours truly is reduced to a decaying skeleton. When time works against me, I find that making that choice isn't easy. This is no longer about obligation or making the moral choice. It's about personal choice. Will stepping on a snail cause a landmine to explode? What if it blows up beneath a playground? And what of the poor snail? Does the flap of a butterfly in England cause a tsunami in the Pacific? I shall leave the digression of chaos theory as so, but stress the significance of making choice under duress. Principles cannot be quantified into mathematical variance in a split second unless one possesses the mind of a computer. However, one can weigh the risks of making a choice. But for a young man on the autistic spectrum, feeling the pressure of time and unable to look beyond the present with certainty, such a logical deduction is rendered nigh impossible. I, Aspie Hyena, think in the present tense. I know not what the future has in store for me. The choices I make are relative to my immediate future and environment. I tend not to look beyond the horizon, except through the proverbial rose-tinted shades of a romantic. Or Dr. Frankenstein unable to prevent disaster because of his misjudged choice in life. Will my work provoke moral outrage and hatred? Or can I inspire creative minds inside an autistic core? That I shan't know until I reach that point in the future. I'll get back to you on that. Thank you for listening to Aspie's vlog. I apologise for my poor timekeeping. As previously mentioned, I do not have a regular schedule. This is something I do in my spare time. If you would like to subscribe, please hit that big bright red button, or leave a comment and tell me if I have chosen wisely. With that said, I'd prefer wasting away to a skeleton than melting like a ranting Nazi. I think there are a couple of meanings in that last sentence, though far be it for me to declare myself a man of wit. I am far too humble to bathe myself in such self-praise. Or am I? I don't know. Never mind. Sorry, a bit of a David Lynch in joke there.